You can see we've had our eye on you for some time now, Mr. Anderson.
I don't believe for 1 second that I am the only one smart enough to pick up the Bible and figure out that we're not supposed to mourn when homosexuals die.
One of these lives has a future, and one of them does not.
So what? So what?
So let's just do a quick check. Let's make sure that none of our Bibles have been tampered with.
I just take pleasure in their death. God has darkened their heart and blinded their eyes. Look, if God darkens your heart and blinds your eyes, you can't believe. You can't believe. Washing our feet in the blood of the wicked in the New Testament. I'm starting to just realize the uncomfortable truth. Who here really struggles hard to be a homo? I mean, it's really hard. And you know what? These people are going to be burning in hell for all eternity. The victory is theirs. It's not ours. They've already won. We've already lost. It's already been written. We've already read the last chapter. And we know
I don't love God.
My rent district, here he goes, crossing himself. Oh! He's done.
Welcome everybody to another edition of the Pocket Locker Podcast. Man, I ain't gonna lie to you, man. I am over here reminiscing with the old school Restream setup. This is so fun. I gotta see that Hot Program commercial one more time, gang. This is literally the first Hot Program and only Hot Program commercial I've made. Somebody needs to start putting this commercial on their channel. This is low key brilliant. Like, this is so good.
My rent district, here he goes, crossing himself. Oh! He's done.
Crossing himself, and then he just fucking wipes out. Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, that clip is so good. Oh, man. All right, gang, let's go ahead and jump into this shit. Get our fucking day started. Greet your neighbors. Say hi to everybody. Let's go ahead and get into our communion. Please raise your glasses and hold on to your asses. Through him, with him, in the unity of the flying man. All glory and honor is yours who flied for our sins forever and ever. You may drink. Gang, I've been looking forward to this all day. All right, let us go ahead and get now into our communion song. This one comes to us from OG Roddy.
Ready for takeoff?
Whoa. Working hard on my stump, what's the problem? I ain't had shit to show, being modest. Now it's grams of the wax for my conscience. Bron James in LA, you're on college. I've been jumping on them planes like a hobby. Still moving with the pack like my partners. Took the John on them jets cause you wildin'. But the bowl is a party on the island. Moment of silence. So good, get back to the topic. Grew up, it was me and Flocka. Grandma's and Big T, this my mama. I ain't even for the pain when my pots flipped. Knew his name, that's it, never bothered. Mom said, you the man, son, you got this. Ever since I found a way to go and pop shit. Hold up, blaze through a whole zip. Took a seat at the table of my first flip. Days in red roof with my first whip. Spent the money with the gang, never post pics. Seen a change in the game, had to coach it. Never let them take my wangs in the mold, bitch. Ever made in a month, nigga. Used to serve him at the minute just to front, nigga. Goddamn. Had to grow up quick, I made my own rules. Had my first child, got it jumping with music. Can't really hang with nobody who losing.
Nah.
I thought by now that you would go and get it, but I could hardly see niggas as distant. Know you get cropped if you not in the picture.
Let's go.
And I made that tag and went got a bag. Shots to the Henny and OG prescriptions, put rebel shit on the map. Took a leap from where I started at. Started ballin' now, I'm Chris Paul and Cass. Got him steady calling for the mode, but I'm on a roll, gotta call him back. And that's all fact.
Airplane mode, baby. When you show up, you gotta get into the mode. You gotta let your neighbors know. It's got me fucking muted. Yeah. Fuck this shit. That's awful. All right. All right, well, there we go. All right, well, I don't know what the fuck to do. Fuck this show. All right, gang, let's pull this back. We'll start this shit over. Here we go.
Hey everybody, so there was recently an interview between Bill Maher and Elon Musk, two of the best guys who are sort of doing the game right now, where they talked a lot about the woke mind virus.
I mean, you have talked about this woke mind virus.
Yes.
In really apocalyptic terms.
Yeah.
You should explain why you don't think it's hyperbole.
I don't have like a big point to make about this interview. It's just a mess, and as a scholar of wokeness, I wanted to walk you through it. So when Bill Maher asks Musk, why should we be so worried about wokeness, he gives a pretty straightforward answer.
I think we need to be very cautious about anything that is anti-meritocratic and anything that is that results in the suppression of free speech. So, you know, those are two of the aspects of the woke mind virus that I think are very dangerous.
The two main problems with wokeness are, one, that wokeness is anti-meritocratic, and two, that wokeness and cancel culture is opposed to free speech. Already, there is a big problem here, the problem that everybody has with these kinds of definitions, and it's that both of these things are extremely pervasive in culture at large, and not particularly tied to wokeness. For example, if meritocracy is so important, it's not clear why we should be zooming in on wokeness and not just like the way that power and resources are distributed. It is on its face anti-meritocratic to have a system where poor people are given so many less opportunities than rich people are. And yet,
all right, so you know what else is anti-meritocratic? Fucking racism, fucking bigotry, fucking misogyny, right? All that unsexy and unvibrant shit. That's what I said before. Somehow I remembered. All right. They never complain about that shit. And the thing is, that shit is like a fucking mind virus. That's like turning the average American into a fucking bigoted zombie out to get anybody that doesn't fucking look like them or believe like they do. And these two fuckfaces have nothing to say about that shit. Matter of fact, they'd rather appeal to those people. It's this I don't know, gang. I'm really angry lately, and I'm trying to like stay focused on being a little bit constructive, especially since I'm mid-move right now. But I'm particularly disgusted with just the way in which Americans just openly root for the bad guys, and that's pretty much what I expect from these two fuckfaces.
Musk doesn't refer to this system as an existential threat. He doesn't call it a mind virus. We can make this same point about free speech, right? It is, once again, obviously against free speech to ban trans women and drag queens from public life, to ban books from libraries and schools. Also, cancel culture is very...
Also, I gotta talk about one, like, bias against people we don't find attractive. Like, it's really weird, but like, I just, yeah, I don't know. I feel bad because I've made fun of some people for the way they look. Not a good thing to do, but I do feel like that's a severe prejudice on our society that nobody really acknowledges much, and I fucking feel for people. That's bullshit too.
Obviously not exclusive to the left. For example, there was recently a massive conservative campaign to boycott Anheuser-Busch because they advertised with a trans woman. Yet, once again, there is no mention of the conservative mind virus. No claim that conservatives pose an imminent threat to society or whatever. These criticisms I just made are maybe boring at this point. You've probably heard them both a million times, and I'm very much repeating myself when I say that wokeness, defined by right-leaning people, is just progressive stuff that they don't like. There is no deep underlying principle here, just a lot of people pretending there is one. But this conversation gets like way weirder. After Musk airs his concerns, Maher asks him, what do you think is
Hang on,
causing
we need
this?
fucking
What do you
seatbelts
think
up
is
in this
causing all
bitch.
the woke? Musk says that it's university culture, and then says this.
No,
really
pause the tape, pause the tape, pause the tape. What? Musk told everyone to go watch Matt Walsh's What is a Woman today on Twitter, and 2 of the Twitter safety top dogs quit over that just today. Yes. Stephanie, thanks for coming through with the timely news, and I'm applauding those 2 people who walked out. I don't know what took them so long. Should we be booing them for taking this long to realize they actually worked for someone who's contributing to the actual downfall of civilization? But it is all good. You get off when you get off. I'm glad they got off. But seriously, and everything's context, right? So here's how we're gonna deal with this, because it's about to be a whole month of this. So I'm gonna tell you exactly how we're gonna handle this. Everybody that comes out with the anti-LGBTQ shit during Pride Month is just officially an extra strong piece of human excrement. And it will be auto-filed under things we shall remember. It's just because it's the same shit with like fuckface Doug, right? That's how the beef with Doug started. It was coming at racial issues during racially insensitive times. And I'm like, for you to do this shit right now is totally inexcusable. And we're gonna deal with a month of that shit because it's Pride Month. And let us never forget who these fuckfaces are and exactly what they say. And remember that they say it during Pride Month, because that's the type of assholes they are. These are the ones who know exactly what time it is, exactly what we are trying to do in society, exactly the steps we are trying to take forth towards equity, and they can't stand it. They can't stand it. And so this month they are going to rub our fucking noses in it. Cool. We're gonna file it away under things we shall never forget. And that's how we're gonna play this, gang. I ain't fucking with none of these people this month. Not at all, not even a little bit.
Strange anecdote to demonstrate.
Elon Musk can go fuck himself. This man bought Twitter to use it as a personal megaphone of fucking bigotry and fucking nonsense. And now he's on HBO sitting down with Bill Maher, literally like basking in the glow of his genius for discussing the woke mind virus. Bro, the only mind virus that's actually infected America is the fucking dumbasses who fucking want to tell you what a genius Elon Musk is. Something is really the fuck wrong with them fools.
That a friend of mine told me, which his daughters go to college go to high school in the Bay Area, and he was asking them, like, well, so who are the first few presidents of the United States? They could name Washington, and I said, well, what do you know about him? Well, he was a slave owner. What else?
Right.
Boom, cool, period, end of story. The funny thing is, I was about to interrupt and say, when I think of the early presidents, I literally think slave owner. White man, why do you think I care? Why? What? This is some bullshit. What do you think? That's meritocracy? Do you think because you memorized the periodic table in 8th grade that you've earned more in society? Like, people with their just irrelevant, look at what I know. Look at what I find to be really important for everyone to know. But again, you have no sense of the history we're living in right now. So it doesn't matter. It does. Telling me you can name all the presidents is supposed to be some sort of indication that your dumb ass knows something about history. But if you would know anything about history, you would know that you are standing on the wrong side of it, actually making history right now yourself as like a comic book character come to life in the nightmare that is living in a fucking America where Elon Musk is not only making fucking rockets that blow up, but is also literally blowing up social media while he's at it, just because he feels like pissing away $30 billion. So I don't give a fuck if he knows all the presidents, all the first ladies, all the secretaries of state and the chiefs of staffs and the directors of the CIA. I don't give a fuck. You're a fucking asshole.
Exactly.
Nothing.
Right.
Like, okay, that's maybe you should know more than that.
Maybe not. Why the fuck should we know more than that?
That is the woke mind virus. Exactly.
Yes, yes, the ancient white men. Yes, yes, the founding fathers. Yes, yes, you must lick their booty holes at all times. You must. They were great. They were great men. Yes, they were. Fuck out of here.
Big fan of this anecdote.
I wish I could
just
forget
like a
every
full
goddamn thing I
sludge
learned
moment,
about
you
those
know?
assholes.
For one thing, it is just obviously made up, you know? Like his conservative friend told a story about their shitty child, and we're just supposed to be like, wow, that's horrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. Your son didn't know a fact about George Washington besides that he owned slaves? I believe you, and I'm here to talk whenever you need me. But more importantly, why exactly is Musk even saying this? I thought the main points of concern here were meritocracy and free speech. Now we also have to be super worried about how fondly we remember slave-holding founding fathers? We have to talk about how everyone owned slaves and it wasn't just white people?
Slavery is obviously a horrific institution, but we should still know more about George Washington than that.
And by the way, one that was practiced all over the world
Yes, yes.
forever, since the beginning of time, by every race, including the people of color. I'm sorry to tell you that.
Why is that happening? I should emphasize here that the fact that Americans own slaves, that our founding fathers owned slaves, is a point that probably should be worrying to anyone who cares a lot about meritocracy. But here, it's just grist for the mill, right? My horrible friend.
This is so true. I really appreciate it for bringing up this point. This fucking meritocracy bullshit. I'm really appreciating his insight on that. Also, though, like, when people get into this narrative, you're debating, you're using slavery as a topic. Like, who gives a shit? I will talk about it. Slavery sucks. Again, I will tell you, there are more people living in slavery today than at any point in human history, okay? Slavery is one of them things that gets worse, not better. And we don't even talk about it. See, what we did when we talk about eradicating slavery, whereas we made slavery, anti-slavery laws. And now that we made anti-slavery laws, we get to pretend we ended slavery. But yes, slavery was practiced all over the place. Black people practiced slavery. Matter of fact, it was Africans who sold Africans to the Americans to send them over across into slavery into America. How does any of this absolve America of its original sin of building this country on the backs of enslaved Negroes? It doesn't. It doesn't. See, when you say he did it too, and they did it too, and they did it too, notice how you're not saying you didn't do it. See, so the correct thing to say would be, we don't practice slavery here and we never did. Yes, since you can't say that, you need to take accountability for the slavery that was practiced, period, end of story. This is just ridiculous. Also, I gotta say this, and I gotta start saying this more often. The only people infected by a woke mind virus are the fucking conservatives. Nobody thinks more about what what districts black people can vote in than fucking conservatives. Nobody thinks more about which neighborhoods they might run into black people in and they should stay out of than fucking conservatives. Nobody is more concerned about the sexual orientation of their children than motherfucking conservatives. Nobody is thinking more about which bathroom you should use than fucking conservatives. Nobody is more concerned with what you decide to do with your pregnancy than you are than motherfucking conservatives. They are the wokest motherfuckers. I have to be honest. Like, gang, I'm gonna just keep it real. It's Pride Month. Let's keep it OG and celebrate how far we've come, which is not far enough. But like, seriously, a lot of the progress I've made in recent years on progressive issues are literally issues that I didn't know that much about because they didn't affect my life every day. So I was kind of in cruise control, chilling through life. But what happened? The motherfucking woke ass conservatives started fucking culture war here, culture war there, cancel this group, make sure they don't use the bathroom, make sure they can't play sports, make sure they can't vote, make sure they can't determine their own family planning, and then all of a sudden, we having to get educated like a motherfucker on all types of shit. You know what I'm saying? Because of the conservatives. Y'all are literally responsible for the progressive education of billions of people because we now all have to constantly pay attention to the culture wars y'all keep starting. Y'all are the wokest of the woke, and I wish you would go back to sleep. Holy shit, these people are hypocritical.
Story about their child who definitely hates them, and I think that's what's causing the single most important threat to society. There's one last thing I need to talk about. It's this moment right toward the start of the interview, and I'll just play it now.
So you are one of these dealers, these people who deal the cards and
I deal some memes too.
Yes,
Some
you're a dealer.
It's a shocking moment, honestly, just watching Elon Musk make perhaps the worst joke ever made, that he deals memes
Except
and then
if you
laugh
watched
about
him
it
do
like
Saturday
a
Night
fucking
Live.
maniac. Look at Bill Maher in this scene. Hear how uncomfortable he is, his little forced laugh. I don't like the guy, but I have to admit, I do empathize with him in this moment. Anyway, bye.
That's my guy. All right, that guy's fun, man. All right, look, we're gonna keep the Friday show rolling. Look, so apparently we're going in. We're gonna talk about some labor shit today. So apparently, good old UPS. What can Brown do for you? You know what I'm talking about? It might be going on strike, and this could be the largest strike in U.S. history, apparently. Now, growing up, my stepdad actually worked for UPS. He drove a truck for UPS, and yeah, I don't know. It's always considered a good job for a lot of people to have. Obviously, a huge fucking organization, but yeah, I don't know. We always had fond memories of That's how I got into trucking. That's how I got into trucking. I fucking love trucks. All right, here we go. Let's talk about UPS.
Getting really expensive to order something online or to send a package, you're not going crazy. UPS, the worldwide leader in package shipping, has been jacking up prices over the past few years, up to 11% on packages this year alone. In 2022, the increases led to record revenue, $100 billion, and in profit, $13.1 billion.
While UPS making billions of dollars in profit, they have people living in the shelter, working for them, can't afford a room.
As you've probably guessed by now, none of that additional profit went to its workers. Instead, UPS is trying to turn its union drivers, warehouse workers, and technicians into glorified gig workers. But the Teamsters, who represent 340,000 UPS workers in tense contract negotiations, are fighting back. If they don't get a fair deal by July 31st, they'll launch the biggest single employer strike in American history. Here's why that matters and what's at stake. Not just for UPS workers, but for you too.
Who are we? Teamsters. Who have the power? We have the power.
To understand what's happening right now, it's crucial to know how the situation got this urgent. For decades and decades, working at UPS was a good job that provided a comfortable middle-class life, and it was the union that made that possible. Feeling the heat of the rising labor movement, UPS founder Jim Casey got desperate and preemptively invited the Teamsters to organize UPS workers in 1919. Teamsters leadership had its ups and downs over the years, but the local rank and file always went hard, and they had to. It took threats of a statewide strike in Kentucky to get UPS to simply back off making workers wear bow ties on the job. And the job always meant good pay, healthcare, a pension, and stability. That began to shift in 1982, when UPS began instituting a two-tier pay system that forced part-time workers to take a serious pay cut. The same thing was happening across the country, and between deregulation, corporate consolidation, and trickle-down economics, the conditions continued to decline. In 1991, the Teamsters elected a new reformer president named Ron Carey. And in 1997, he led 185,000 unionized UPS workers out on a massive strike. The strike cost UPS tens of millions of dollars every single day. And after 15 days, the company tapped out. With the public on their side, the Teamsters won big raises for everyone and got 20,000 part-time jobs turned into 10,000 full-time jobs. New conservative leadership unfortunately failed to hold on to many of those wins, and in 2018 agreed to another two-tier pay system that workers absolutely hate. That was the final straw. In 2021, Teamsters rank and file elected an aggressive new president named Sean O'Brien.
And they always ask us when we're doing media, do you want to strike UPS? I said, you should ask UPS that question because they are going to be responsible if a strike happens.
Now, they're looking to win a new contract that reflects their worth and gets workers across the country back on track in the war against corporate greed.
But look, let's talk about it. That is the fucking cancer that is killing this goddamn country. And I wish a conservative in the room would have the intestinal fortitude to talk about it. I mean, if you cannot turn a profit without starving your employees, your business model fucking blows. But that's not what's going on. These companies are making fucking record profits during these times. And a lot of them are like, you know, using, you know, recent disruptions in society as an excuse to jack up their fucking profit margins. And it's totally irresponsible, especially after the lopsided fucking way all the fucking COVID assistance was dealt with. This is just awful. I fucking hate this country. I really want to leave. Look, we're going to need to start a GoFundMe to get me the fuck up out of the United States. Gang, I need to burn this country to the ground.
We make their profits. All of them sit there, they tell us what to do. They tell us how to run their business, but we do the work. And all we're saying is it's our time.
Now, one employee did get a nice payday last year. CEO Carol Tomei took home $19 million. Shareholders did well too, as UPS dropped $3.5 billion on stock buybacks. The Teamsters have a much different proposal for how all that money is spent. It's got more than a dozen points, which we'll group together in 4 different, packages. In package number 1, working conditions. Workers want management to stop harassing them, stop monitoring their every move with driver-facing cameras up in their faces, put some air conditioning in the trucks, and quit it with the forced overtime for starters.
Oh, that's crazy talk. That's crazy talk. That's crazy talk. None of this should even be on the table right now. First off, surveillance state, go fuck yourself. Like, having GPS monitoring on these trucks is more than enough. You have to remember, long before the days of GPS, right? Like, man, a lot of y'all got truckers in your family. Don't act like y'all don't got truckers in your family. Y'all know what it was about, right? They had to keep them fucked up ass logs, right? Or they had, then they had ways of calling, and then of course, like, the biggest one is just your time, right? Like, you're supposed to be from place to place in terms of your route, in terms of where when your packages are supposed to be delivered. There's all types of ways to monitor the efficiency of your drivers, and you don't need something that invasive. I'm not necessarily opposed to it for the police, but I really don't see what anybody gets from having their, UPS driver, having a camera up their UPS driver's nostrils all day. Forced overtime, UPS, go fuck yourself. Like, it's 2023. Again, people should be able to, earn their day's wage in an 8-hour workday, as is the expectation throughout society. I mean, this is just ridiculous. And not having air conditioning in the trucks, again, I'm gonna tell you, like the Christians, you need to go do some reflecting in the mirror, and you should absolutely be ashamed of yourself. Like, are we really having this conversation? I had no idea. Are we really having this conversation about air conditioning when you drive a goddamn truck all day? Gang, there was air conditioning in this shitty ass U-Haul I just fucking rented to move boxes, to the other side of town or whatever the fuck.
No more 14-hour days, 6 days a week. And in package number 2, and this is the big one, is the end of two-tier. They want equal pay for equal work. Right now, some of the drivers get full-time pay and weekends off, while a whole generation of new drivers, known as 22-4s internally at UPS, get screwed.
Drivers are divided into two. They do the same job, but some of them are under that new contract, and the other ones are regular drivers. And the difference is, like, I believe, even like $10 the hour difference.
I mean, it's no different. Now, see, this is about to be a class warfare you're going to see all over America, right? Because not the working class, the elite, the ruling class, the controlling people, they're always trying to make the shit worse. They're trying to make the system harder. They're just fucking assholes, right? So they're always trying to rejigger the system now to be even worse. And to the extent that they can't fuck with people who are part of the organization on better deals, it creates that two-tiered system, right? Where, like they say, like they're trying to push it towards the gig economy, like that would be where they would go with the whole model, right? But then they got the union and the older union ones and all of that shit, so creates a two-tier system. They're doing the same goddamn thing in academia, like where they're trying to basically cut down on how many tenure faculty line positions they offer by creating this whole like other tier of faculty members who don't have tenure, technically only have year-to-year deals, a lot of times don't have like research support, or they don't have a lot of the same benefits. Like it's just the whole mess. And yeah, it's just creating the same kind of struggle where it's becoming harder and harder for people to get the type of secure jobs that, you know, motivated them to go into this type of work. At the same time, the shift towards unstable employment is making those jobs fewer and far between. And then there is a lot of tension between, you know, faculty members, even like within departments, and they have different levels of responsibilities. Like the non-tenure faculty do most of the teaching and all of that type of shit. So it's fucked up.
Difference at all. That's what's, you know, unfair about it. The fact that 22.4 drivers are doing the same exact job. In fact, we're actually working much more, you know, out there, longer hours, you know, delivering higher volumes for such a less pay.
Luckily you missed that portion, so you should be all right.
I have to come in, then I go home. I try to get as much sleep as I can get before I come in the next time, which is 4:30 to 8:30 p.m. that same day, and then go home and get some sleep again. I can tell you that I'm extremely exhausted. Every part of my body is hurting right now. Just the only reason why I come to work is because I need money, you know?
Now, UPS wants all full-timers to work brutal schedules with no real weekend. It also wants to hire more part-timers, which brings us to UPS's dirty secret. The company likes to boast about high wages, but only a small percentage of workers receive it. 60% of its workers are part-time, often making barely above minimum wage.
The starting pay for part-timers has been stagnant for a long time. We work in the dawn of the morning, and we work, it's physically challenging. From about 4 o'clock, we are subjected to a rigorous undertaking. We're guaranteed 3.5 hours. Within that time, we do like 8 hours worth of work.
So that's package number 3, better pay for part-timers, and to turn these jobs into full-time. In essence, UPS's goal is to be a lot more like Amazon, treating workers like disposable widgets, which is how they already view your packages.
How they treat the packages, they don't care. As long as you get the deliveries done, that's all that matters to them. Numbers, that's all that matters to them.
UPS is miles apart from getting it right now. The company wants fewer full-time workers and more part-timers. In fact, they want workers that aren't Teamsters at all. Uber and Lyft-esque gig workers that deliver packages out of their own cars. And that's package number 4. No subcontracting, and no gig workers taking union drivers' work. Baseline, keep UPS a union workforce. Guaranteed schedules and fair pay. Respect workers. The clock is ticking on negotiations. On one side are the workers and consumers. The other, UPS and Wall Street. A good contract for the Teamsters will show the power of working people over corporate America. Not just for UPS workers, but for working people everywhere.
Yeah, we're fucked. We're fucked. Yeah, it's fucked up too. God damn, it's fucked up. Oh man, gang. I need you guys here. This is we'll get through this shit, gang. All right. So I thought that would be a great setup for the main event of the evening. Which is time to talk about communism. Yeah, Lean, I'm with you pretty much on socialism. Yeah. Yeah. Except I'm a little bit just antithetical to trusting governments, so I gotta work through that part.
1975, the South Vietnamese capital of Saigon fell to the communist North Vietnamese army. After years of extremely deadly warfare that did nothing to turn the tides of communist takeover of the country, the South Vietnamese army could no longer continue the fight. The United States, after propping up the South Vietnamese and joining the fight against the communist North, had pulled out 2 years prior, declaring the war a failure failure and withdrawing aid to the country that it had helped to destabilize. Now, a few thousand American army and diplomats remained in the country, and with the fall of Saigon, the remaining US citizens, along with the Vietnamese citizens who aided them and their families, were in imminent danger. In the days leading up to the fall of Saigon, the North Vietnamese army was advancing rapidly, and it quickly became apparent that they would soon take the city. Vietnamese living in Saigon stood in lines outside the American embassy, attempting to get visas and flee the oncoming army, knowing that any connection to the US would mean detention or death once the Northern Army took over. On April 29th, the North Vietnamese began shelling the US airbase in Saigon, and the mass evacuation began. By this point, the North Vietnamese had blocked all waterways and airways to and from Vietnam. No planes could land and no ships could come to the rescue. The only way out was via helicopter evacuation to waiting US Army ships out in open sea. The US Embassy became the only way to escape Saigon. 10,000 Vietnamese pushed against US Embassy gates, hoping to get a spot on the departing helicopters. Pilots flew for 19 hours straight. Helicopters landed in 10-minute intervals across the US Embassy grounds, including on the embassy roof. In less than 24 hours, over 7,000 people were evacuated from Saigon via helicopter, including 5,500 Vietnamese citizens. On April 30th, what remained of the US-backed South Vietnamese government resigned unconditionally, and North Vietnamese tanks drove through the streets of the now-occupied Saigon. A military government was instituted, and on July 2nd, 1976, the country was officially united as the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. What started as US intervention to keep communism from spreading further into Asia ended in a bloody, failed, years-long war that resulted in over 58,000 US military deaths and over 3 million Vietnamese people killed. And for what? Well, to fight the commies, of course. The United States defeated Vietnam betrayed an uncomfortable truth that many Americans don't want to admit to this day. Maybe a war against communism can't be won. Maybe the lines between us and them, between the good guy and the bad guy, once so seemingly clear and incredibly black and white, are much more blurry than our collective imagining of the American consciousness can account for. But how did we get here? Why did the United States take on the fight to root out communism at all costs in the first place? And what has it accomplished? I set out to figure out the answer to this question, and what I found, frankly, can't be thoroughly summed up in a tidy YouTube video. But I'll do my best to explain why the United States is so obsessed with communism. Roll the intro.
All right, gang, we're gonna use this opportunity for me to filibuster about, I don't fucking know. I just, I don't know. I'm chilling. All right, we're done with the intro. Saying some blase in the Glavinoids. Back to our regularly scheduled program.
Growing up in the United States as a teen in the early 2000s, I remember being taught a pretty whitewashed and sterile version of US history, especially our history and conflicts related to communism. The conflicts we were involved with as a nation were written as almost preordained. This happened because it had to happen, as though history is a series of logical steps, as opposed to a messy smattering of events that we have to organize in hindsight. And the United States' history with communism is certainly messy. But before we get into why the heck we're so obsessed with it, let's get some definitions out of the way. What the heck even is communism? Well, to answer that question, we also have to answer the question, what is socialism? Because communism is a type of socialism, or an outgrowth of socialism. In the most basic sense, socialism is a social and economic system that involves public, as opposed to private, ownership and control of property and natural resources. Under the socialist view, individuals
see, that's the thing. See, I'm about the public and the people. But then you get to how you do that, and that involves governments, and I don't trust governments, and it's
live in cooperation with one another, and everything people produce is in some sense a social product. So everyone who contributes is also entitled to a share in the production of society. Therefore, the society as a whole should own or control property for the benefit of all its members. This is of course an extremely simplified view of socialism, and two key divisions have occurred to complicate this doctrine. First, socialists disagree on the extent and kind of property that society should own and control. Should society own everything, including the shirt off your back? Or is there flexibility for some private ownership? What about small businesses like farms and shops? And second, there's disagreement about the way in which society is to exercise its control over property and resources. Via a centralized government, via a decentralized cooperation of multiple local governments, or something else. These ideas—
Yeah, I lean more towards like local collectives of people, but then what does that look like? That starts to look like a local government after a while. How local is local? Then you end up with the fucking city, then you end up with the county and the state, and the shit starts to, they make it, they always try to make it look like this, that status quo shit's deep, y'all. They're gonna try to take whatever remix and try to turn that shit back into the original, and that's the fucked up part we gotta watch out for.
Ideas have been around for centuries, but socialism got its formal name around the 1830s, and the idea of socialism as we know it today got its rise during the Industrial Revolution. Which makes sense. You had a shift from agrarian society to free market capitalism and a conglomeration of power in the
cue like ominous fucking music. I don't know what to fucking tell you. Capitalism takes credit for a lot of good things that you and I enjoy as part of modern life, but I don't get fun, sexy, vibrant vibes from fucking capitalism. Maybe that's because I'm like not at the top of the capitalist hierarchy, and capitalism's all about hierarchies, and then like it's really about being at the top of the hierarchy. So maybe if I was like towards the top of the hierarchy, I'd be like, go capitalism, this shit's sweet. But probably not, because I like to think I'd like look out at the fact that like other people weren't really doing that well, and I'd be like, this view kind of sucks. Wouldn't it be a better view if everybody was thriving? Ooh, we should do something about this. But I don't know, gang. I don't know. I'm not an economist, thank the fucking Lord, because that job sounds boring as shit. See, that's the other problem. That's the other problem. Somebody's got to fix this economic shit. You need economists to do that type of shit. I went to grad school for fucking biology, and I got to be honest with you, gang, that wasn't sexy and vibrant every day. It wasn't fucking always easy. There's a lot of shit you learn, and you're like, really? Am I really? So you guys mean to get this ecology and evolutionary biology programs, I have to go to ecology graduate courses? Oh fuck. Right? Somebody's got to be up for the economics, gang. Who the fuck's up for the economics? Don't look over here. Don't look over here. I just want to rant about the problems. Somebody else comes up with the solution. That's not a very productive way to be in business, but this is not my business. This is me ranting and raving in my spare time because I'm an angry human being.
Hands of large businesses that were then concentrating the wealth in the hands of the few, while workers lived in poverty and worked under increasingly dangerous conditions. Yeah, the Communist Manifesto was published in 1848 by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. They criticized early ideals of socialism as being unrealistic utopian dreams. Instead, they advocated for a strong central government to control all aspects.
I'm kidding. But you know that's how everybody feels about them motherfuckers. These are two of the most severely misunderstood people. And I'm not going to say a whole lot more because I don't necessarily understand them a whole lot better, but I did get to read their shit a little bit when I was in college. That was a good time. Shout out to, what was that class called? Social stratification. Boom.
Of economic production and provided citizens with their basic needs like food, shelter,
Yes, Christians, it's a sociology course. That fucking discipline y'all like to pretend doesn't exist. Let me roll back. I've been ranting.
They criticized early ideals of socialism as being unrealistic utopian dreams. Instead, they advocated for a strong central government to control all aspects of economic production and provided citizens with their basic needs like food, shelter, medical care, and education. Communism was also sometimes referred to as revolutionary socialism because Marx and other communist thinkers argued that all of history was, in the end, a history of class struggles. He believed that the working class, or proletariat, would inevitably triumph through revolutionary struggles over the wealthy class, or bourgeoisie, gaining control over the means of production and ultimately erasing class distinctions. And this theory was put to the test in Russia during the Russian Revolution of 1917 and the installation of the world's first communist government in the Soviet Union. In the United States around this time, the Socialist Party was seeing its heyday. In the years before World War I, the Socialist Party in the United States claimed 113,000 members, making it one of the largest socialist movements in the world. In the 1912 and 1920 elections, the Socialist Party gained 900,000 votes, most notably for Eugene V. Debs, who was running for president, at one point running from prison. I made a whole separate video about that. In 1990...
And that's about to be followed up by one Donald fuckface Trump. Gang, part of this too is, you know, when you hear these conversations about, well, this communist regime, that, this socialist regime, this other thing, I don't know how we separate the system from the implication and the execution, right? Like, just because a particular socialist regime sucks ass doesn't mean, you know, socialism is a inherently unworkable system, because it could have just been something fucked up about that particular government. Just like I personally think capitalism sucks all the bad things that you could do, because I live in America under capitalism and it's fucking awful. It's fucking terrible. So why don't we use America as a prime example of why capitalism is evil?
The party splintered when the communist members split and eventually formed the Communist Party USA. Though their official numbers were smaller, topping out at 66,000 members in 1939, the Communist Party was able to amass 115,000 votes for Senate races in 1940. That all fell apart after World War II. Despite the fact that the United States was briefly allied with Russia to defeat Germany during World War II, immediately after the war, Russia claimed control over much of Eastern Europe instead of reinstating independence to the countries it helped liberate from the Germans, thus forming the USSR. It was in this fallout from World War II that the US obsession with communism took full force. Prior to the Second World War, communists and socialists existed in the United States with some skepticism, especially given the human rights abuses committed by the newly formed Soviet Union. But after the Second World War, the zeitgeist against communism began in full force. This was aided by the founding of the House Un-American Activities Committee. Founded in 1938 to root out Nazi sympathizers in the government, the committee became a central force for rooting out communism in all arms of society, including holding highly publicized hearings targeting Hollywood, leading to the creation of a blacklist and ruining the careers and lives of many budding artists in Hollywood for the next decade. In 1947, President Truman put forth what would become known as the Truman Doctrine, pledging that the United States would help any nation resist communism in order to prevent its spread. This policy was also known as the containment policy. Like, all right, maybe we can't defeat the Russians, but it has to stop with them. We must contain communism at all costs. That same year, Truman signed Executive Order 9835, which provided the FBI with broad powers to investigate federal employees for potential security risks, aka communist sympathizers and spies sending information to the Soviets. And also in 1947, Truman created the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and quickly began using the new agency's covert activities to promote his containment theory. Then in 1949, the Soviet Union exploded its first atomic bomb, and the United States was like, oh no, we're supposed to be the only ones capable of ending life on Earth with the push of a button, boo.
Exactly.
And then a few months later, the Chinese Communist Party officially...
That just so perfectly summarizes how I feel about this country. We are just so blatant with our elitism and sense of literally like Team America World Police. I just think that movie accurately portrays how Americans feel about America.
Declared victory in the Chinese Civil War that had been raging since 1927. So much for containment. This led to increased fear that secret communists within the United States government had been spying for the Soviets, sending them bomb-making secrets and thwarting communications that could have enabled the US to ward off the communist victory in China. And it was in this national atmosphere, just ripe with fear, that Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy burst onto the scene in February of 1950. At what was supposed to be a low-profile speech in the small town of Wheeling, West Virginia, McCarthy waved a sheet of paper in the air, proclaiming to the audience, "I have here in my hand a list of 205 names that were made known to the Secretary of State as being members of the Communist Party, and who, nevertheless, are still working and shaping U.S. policy." It was later revealed that he didn't actually have a list, and when pressed for names, he waffled, saying he actually had 57.
We are special, like we go to international school on the... Never mind.
Names, and then saying he had 81 names, and then finally promising that he definitely had at least one name for one communist in the government. But even though his evidence was shaky at best, that didn't matter. He had lit the flame, fanned by fear and paranoia of what would become known as the Red Scare. Throughout the early 1950s, American leaders regularly told the public to be fearful of the subversive influence of communism in their lives. Communists could be lurking anywhere, on college campuses, in labor unions, among artists and journalists, in your children's school. Boo! Senator McCarthy capitalized on this paranoia, launching a series of highly publicized probes into alleged communist penetration into all arms of the government, the State Department, the White House, the Treasury, the Army. At the University of California, 31 professors were dismissed in 1950 for refusing to sign a loyalty oath. The Senate internal...
Yeah, and see, academia is still suffering from this assumption that it's secretly a covert arm of some socialist intelligentsia, when really it's just like most of society, where there's a bunch of fucking conservative overlords who fund things and prevent people from having reasonable working conditions. It's pretty much just like the rest of capitalism.
Security Act mandated that all communist organizations had to register with the government, giving the Senate greater power to investigate potential communists for sedition and revoking or barring citizenship to suspected communists. This anti-communist fervor played out in courtrooms as well. In 1950, a couple named Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were indicted on charges of giving nuclear secrets to the Russians. Julius had worked briefly at the U.S. Army Signal Corps laboratory in New Jersey, where he had access to classified information. He and his wife Ethel had also been members of the American Communist Party in the 1930s. Based on evidence that was shaky at best, Ethel and Julius were found guilty in 1951 of espionage under Section 2 of the Espionage Act of 1917, which stated that anyone found guilty of transmitting information related to national defense to a foreign country could be imprisoned for life or put to death. In June 1953, both Ethel and Julius were executed via the electric chair. Several decades later, evidence came out that definitively showed Julius, but not Ethel, had given information to the Soviet Union. If the Espionage Act of 1917 sounds familiar, that's because it's the same law that Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, and more recently the former president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, have all been accused or charged with violating. The Rosenbergs remain...
And what will the conservatives do when Donald Trump's fuckface's ass is on that same list, gang? Let's go through the list again.
But not Ethel had given information to the Soviet Union. If the Espionage Act of 1917 sounds familiar, that's because it's the same law that Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, and more recently the former president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, have all been accused or charged with violating. The Rosenberg...
That shit is epic. The former president has been charged with espionage. And I think there's a story about them finding some audio or some shit of him in related to... Let's
Rosenbergs remain the only people put to death for espionage during peacetime in the United States. The FBI continued to fan the flames of the Red Scare by assisting in the production of blatant anti-communist propaganda films and television shows, including The Red Menace in 1949, My Son John in 1951, and I Led 3 Lives, a show that ran from 1953 to 1956. In these films, as well as in other government propaganda and fear-mongering, anti-communism was aligned with U.S. pride, overt patriotism, religious conviction, and an unflinching faith in the promise of capitalism and the American dream. These were embedded in the US consciousness, along with anti-communism, as undeniably American values. And anything that didn't align with these values was viewed with suspicion. The paranoia led to a rigid enforcement of conformity, and any behavior considered deviant was seen as dangerous. Women who had taken an important place in the workforce during World War II were told to leave their jobs and go back to the home where they belonged. Black people were told to conform to the American social order after fighting and dying for their country. Being gay, which was already stigmatized, became dangerous dangerous, as any personal secrets could potentially expose you to blackmail. Many anti-communists, including Senator McCarthy, believed that gay men were morally weak and were therefore particularly predisposed to betraying their country, and that lesbians and gay men could be...
This country has so much bigotry, gang. Oh, it's just disgusting.
Easily blackmailed by Soviet agents because of their deviant sexual behavior. Not only that, but religion, and most importantly Christianity, became a central bulwark for warding off impending communist doom. McCarthy described the anti-communist movement as an all-out battle between communistic atheism and Christianity. Religious conservatives pushed for the traditional nuclear God-fearing family to protect against the spread of atheistic communism, which was often conflated with totalitarianism after the war. Public displays of religiosity became a prime way in which Americans sought to differentiate themselves from what they considered to be atheist communism. The Pledge of Allegiance was altered to include the words "One Nation Under God" in 1954.
And whoever made that alteration, go fuck yourself. Please, please. That was one of the most unpatriotic moves ever.
God We Trust was adopted as the official national motto in 1956. And one of the most popular films of the decade was The Ten Commandments, which retold the story of Exodus as a Cold War parable. Through this paranoia and propaganda, communism became inextricably linked with amorality, and the idea of fighting communism was permanently implanted in the American psyche as inherently moral, Christian, patriotic, and the ultimate show of being a true American. And the internal fight to root out communism from all facets of American life mirrored and was often overshadowed by external conflicts to further the initial doctrine of containment that President Truman declared at the end of World War II. I can't give you an exhaustive retelling of the many strings that the US pulled internationally in its fight against communism because we ain't got the time, but also because I can guarantee you that there's a lot we simply don't know. But let me give you a smattering of examples so you can get a feel for it, because if anti-communism inside America seemed messy, boy howdy was it a catastrophe abroad. In June 1950, the North Korean army invaded South Korea, bringing to fruition the United States' biggest fears and the reason for the containment doctrine. The United Nations and the United States quickly sent troops over to try to push the North Koreans back and keep South Korea from falling to communist rule. Over the course of 3 bloody years, the border between North and South Korea moved dramatically. When the war ended in a truce in 1953, 36,000 American servicemen were dead, and the border between North and South Korea remained largely unchanged from before the war. In 1950, the same year as the start of the Korean War, Jacobo Arbenz was democratically elected to the presidency of Guatemala. He wasn't a communist, but he was backed by all the leftist parties in the country. Arbenz was committed to what he termed modernization in Guatemala. The main initiative he launched during his presidency was a major agrarian reform bill. As part of that bill, any mass ownership of land where most of the land was not being cultivated would be bought back from the landowners using government bonds and then given to the local peasants to cultivate. Arbenz proposed this bill, and the democratically elected parliament passed it. But here's the pesky thing about land reform. The people with a lot of land really don't like it. And they often have a lot of money to fight it. Ever heard of United Fruit Company? By 1950, the United Fruit Company was the largest landowner and employer in Guatemala. They also made an annual profit of $65 million, which was twice the revenue of the government of Guatemala. And higher-ups in the United Fruit Company, they knew that the Americans hated the commies, so they started doing a little lobbying. The company spent $500,000 on convincing United States lawmakers and civilians that Arbenz needed to be overthrown. But it wasn't just powerful lobbying, no. While the United States was freaked out about communists infiltrating the government, they were perfectly fine with private interests infiltrating every aspect of government operations. Attorney John Foster Dulles had represented the United Fruit Company as their attorney. In 1950, he was the U.S. Secretary of State. His brother, Allen Dulles, was the director of the CIA. Allen also sat on the board of directors of the United Fruit Company. In 1953, Eisenhower authorized the CIA operation to overthrow the government of Jacobo Arbenz. News of this operation was leaked to the Arbenz government, who accused the United States of preparing to overthrow a democratically elected president. The US flatly denied the allegations and accused Arbenz of falling victim to communist propaganda, which the media and American people ate right up. By 1954, Arbenz was badly in need of weapons, because the United States had started blocking arms sales to Guatemala in 1951. So he secretly bought weapons from Czechoslovakia, which of course was then immediately portrayed by the US government as Soviet interference and the establishment of a new communist stronghold right in our own backyard. And that was all the CIA needed to officially launch its coup. By June of 1954, realizing he had lost the support of his army and his people, Arbenz formally resigned the presidency. In the power vacuum left by the coup, a military junta took control of the country, eventually installing Carlos Castillo Armas, a member of the right-wing National Liberation Movement.
Now, this is a man who has a mustache as distinctive as one Adolf Hitler. Gang, oh, and then boom, right there, and you see it's got a bit of a crescent moon thing happening here, and then it's mirrored. It's a bow tie. It's like a bow tie kind of mustache there he's got.
Movement, who created an authoritarian government that was closely allied with the United States. He was also the first of numerous authoritarian rulers in Guatemala, whose reversal of Arbenz's reforms led to the Guatemalan Civil War, which lasted from 1960 to 1996. In 1960, the Republic of...
Did she just say that war lasted 36 years, gang? See, this is why y'all need to get like me, man. Like, civil divorce, man. Just let them go. Just let them go. When they don't want to be part of the same, just let them go.
Congo declared its independence from Belgian rule and held its first democratic elections. The country elected its first prime minister, Patrice Lumumba. Shortly after he assumed office, a Belgian military invasion pushed Lumumba out of power, leading to widespread unrest. And the US, thousands and thousands of miles away, was like, yes, hi, hello, we can help. They decided that the unrest provided fertile ground for what else? Communist invasion. Obviously. And what's the only solution, according to the US? Oh yeah, kill Lumumba, the democratically elected prime minister. The CIA encouraged and facilitated Lumumba's capture in 1960 and assassination in 1961. This incident helped to instigate the Congo crisis from 1960 to 1965, during which a military leader named Mobutu Sese Seko consolidated power. In 1965, the CIA supported Mobutu's coup in the name of preventing the spread of communism. Mobutu became a dictator and ruled the country from 1965 to 1997. Closer to home, the pro-American military Batista dictatorship in Cuba was overthrown by communist revolutionaries led by Fidel Castro in 1959. The immediate US embargo on Cuba, once a playground for America's rich and famous, economically cut the island off at its knees. Ironically, the US act of the embargo created what? Yes, fertile ground for Soviet influence. Cuba became economically dependent on the Soviet Union. That, combined with agrarian reforms that hurt US businesses, we're seeing a pattern here, plus Cuba's support of communist movements abroad, all while being located just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, made Cuba a major communist threat right in America's backyard. When JFK took office, he was briefed on a plan drafted during the previous administration to use Cuban exiles to invade Cuba, anticipating that the Cuban people would welcome American intervention with open arms, and elements of the Cuban military would join hands with Americans and sing Kumbaya and overthrow Castro, installing a non-communist, US-friendly government and living happily ever after. Kennedy approved the operation, and on April 17, 1961, 1,400 Cuban exiles landed in the Bay of Pigs. The entire force was either killed or captured. The next summer, Russian leader Khrushchev had reached a secret agreement with the Cuban government to supply nuclear missiles to the island to protect against another US invasion. American spy planes over Cuba photographed the missile sites as they were under construction. Kennedy responded by placing a naval blockade around Cuba and demanding removal of the missiles. This is commonly known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was the closest the US got to what what many consider to be mutually assured destruction during the Cold War. Recognizing that the crisis could easily escalate into nuclear war, Khrushchev stepped down, agreeing to remove the missiles in return for a pledge from the Americans that they wouldn't try to invade Cuba again. Next door, in the Dominican Republic, longtime dictator Rafael Trujillo was assassinated in 1961. He was a brutal dictator who had, what? Oh, the strong support of the United States, because he was anti-communist. Great. In fact, the United States had occupied the DR from 1916 to 1924 and created the National Police Force, the main vehicle through which Trujillo gained power. Yikes. After Trujillo's assassination, the people of the Dominican Republic elected Juan Bosch to the presidency in 1962. But then he was overthrown by the military, sending the country into chaos, and the United States feared another Cuba was happening in the DR, so in 1965, the US sent 22,000 troops to the DR, which eventually brought an end to the fighting and installed a conservative US sympathetic government. We seeing the pattern here? Around this same time, in 1963, the United States had sent thousands of US soldiers to Vietnam to help fight against the Northern Communist government. When the war in Vietnam began, it was assumed that the
fucking fear-mongering about communism to spread US imperialism. This is just gross and sickening and stomach-churning. And again, like, we can just keep doing this all over again because we just make sure Americans don't ever learn history, so there's that too.
North Vietnamese would fall quickly. They were seen as less than human, primitive beings who lived in grass huts. President Johnson called Vietnam a raggedy-ass fourth-rate country. It was assumed that they didn't stand a chance.
You talked about Vietnam like it's Rebecca Davis or something. I mean, come on.
Against the most technologically advanced society on Earth, the United States. By the end of the war, a decade later, 58,000 American soldiers were dead. The US retreated in defeat, and the war was the longest armed conflict the United States had ever been involved in, and it had cost them $140 billion. And if you're like, well, Leja, that surely must be the end of the story. Such a resounding defeat must have showed the powers in the United States that containment didn't work, and to maybe be a bit more humble about the United States' abilities abroad, well, you'd be wrong, my friend. But after Vietnam, the vibe did morph a little bit. Enter President Reagan. You know him. We talked about him last week. Ever heard of a little thing called the Iran-Contra affair? Well, buckle in, kids, and let me tell you this tale. Throughout the 1970s, the US sold a lot of guns to Iran. Like, so many of them. Because it turns out arms sales is an incredibly lucrative business. Who knew? Anyway, that was until 1979, after the revolution, when a group of Iranian students seized the US Embassy, holding 52 US Embassy workers hostage for 444 days until 1981. The Iran hostage crisis firmly cemented anti-American sentiment in Iran and anti-Iranian sentiment in the US, and led to an arms embargo against Iran. When Reagan took office in 1981, he was like, yeah, let's definitely continue that arms embargo. And he even went to other countries and was like, did you hear about our arms embargo? You should definitely not sell arms to Iran. That would be so bad. At the same time, Reagan was absolutely obsessed with the socialist Sandinista government in Nicaragua. But by the 80s, the US had gotten a little smarter, I guess, at least less willing to openly back violence and coups in other countries. They still did it, but like secretly. You know? And Congress had passed a bill forbidding the use of appropriated funds to back the Contras, a conglomeration of various rebel groups who fought against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. And Reagan was like, no, why? So he found a loophole, or his subordinates did. It was never conclusively shown how much of this scheme Reagan was privy to, but it did happen under his watch. Between 1981 and 1986, Reagan administration officials began secretly facilitating arms sales to Iran. They would then take that money and divert it to the Contras in Nicaragua to support them in their fight against the Sandinistas. It's a loophole because the funds weren't technically appropriated. The sales of weapons to Iran, violation of the arms embargo, and also, it was revealed, in exchange for hostages from Hezbollah, was a major embarrassment for the Reagan administration, because it was literally against the law and also against the stance the administration had publicly taken. U.S. Deputy Attorney General Lawrence Walsh was appointed special counsel to investigate the Iran-Contra affair, and 11 Reagan administration officials were eventually convicted. All convictions were later pardoned in the final final days of the George H.W. Bush presidency, because he was vice president and pretty shady during the Reagan administration. And the affair, despite being incredibly embarrassing, is but a tiny footnote in the legacy of the Reagan presidency, which has been built into a heroic myth by Republicans.
Yeah, we're gonna have
See
to
my
watch
video
that
about
video.
Reagan
She
last
has a
week for
video.
more.
We're
In the
gonna have
years
to watch
since
that
Vietnam and the Iran-Contra affair, the US has continued to covertly stick its nose into affairs. The justification for this meddling, however, has changed. With the end of the Cold War, symbolized by the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, the specter of communism has lifted.
Maybe it's
the
in
fear
the,
that country
video
after
stuff.
country would topple to Soviet communist rule was proved meritless. But instead, a new fear emerged. Throughout the 1980s, the CIA armed and financed Mujahideen rebels fighting the USSR in Afghanistan. Because communism, which benefited, either directly or indirectly, depending on who you ask, the newly formed group, Al-Qaeda, and their leader, Osama bin Laden. On February 26, 1993, a van carrying a homemade bomb entered the lower area of the North Tower of the World Trade Center complex in New York City and detonated. What was meant to send both towers tumbling and kill thousands of people resulted in 6 deaths and the evacuation of 50,000 people in the area. One of the prime conspirators for the bombing was a man named Ramzi Youssef, who had spent time at an Al-Qaeda training camp before beginning his plan to bomb the Twin Towers. 8.5 years later, when the Twin Towers did fall, the United States immediately declared a war on terror. Fear of terrorists infiltrating every corner of life in America gripped the country and led to an extreme increase in violence and hate crimes against Middle Eastern Americans. George Bush Jr. announced a global war on terror aimed at thwarting would-be terrorists before they can act. Under this pretext, the United States invaded numerous countries, instigating the longest armed conflict the United States had ever seen, leading to very little progress in any war on terror and ending in what many would consider a resounding failure. Terrorism, communism, one simply replaced the other in the unrelenting determination that the United States has to be the savior of all and to spread the divine righteousness of American democracy around the globe. So ultimately, what is the answer? Why are Americans so obsessed with communism? Even though the Cold War has ended, Republicans love to still throw the term around. Trump does it.
They want to turn our country into a communist country, Marxist country.
Marjorie Taylor Greene does it. She calls all Democrats the Communist Party of the United States of America. A recent Pew Research study showed that a large majority of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents held a negative view of socialism, saying that socialism undercuts people's initiative and work ethic, making people too reliant on the government for support, and pointing to socialist failures in other countries as proof that socialism doesn't work, or simply saying that socialism is not consistent with United States democracy. Anecdotally, if you ever find yourself on the far-right side of TikTok, which I do not recommend, communist fear-mongering is alive and well, and according to some, the commies have taken over the entire government. As ever, many Republicans use the specter of communism to get American voters to believe that Democrats will bring forth an oppressive future that will mirror the brutal mistakes of communism's past. And terrorism and communism have overlapped in the right-wing American psyche to stand for everything dangerous, oppressive, and un-American.
All right, gang, before I let her finish her crescendo here, gang, let me just insert a little bit of fear-mongering myself, because you, all of our narrow monkey asses find ourselves right in the middle of this goddamn conflict. And you know why? Because we are walking out in the street. And gang, you better be walking out in the goddamn street with me. You better not be fucking like acting like you fucking with us. But then when we go walking in the street, then all of a sudden you I'm not feeling well today, I'm gonna have to sit this one out. We are gonna be walking in the streets flying the goddamn flag for atheism. And you know we're all about the wokeism and the queers and the blacks and the women and all of those fucked up ass marginalized people. So they pretty much got us marked as socialist, commie, leftist, baby eating, Jewish space laser, whatever. That's us. Just own it. Just own it, because they're fucking coming for our asses.
During the Republican National Convention, Donald Trump Jr. pledged that a vote for his dad would bring about a world in which the good guys persevere over dark forces, saying, "Imagine a world where the evils of communism and radical Islamic terrorism are not given a chance to spread, where heroes are celebrated and the good guys win." And that is just about as good a summation as any to answer
Antifa, Liz Allen, obviously Antifa, duh, Antifa.
to the question, why are Americans obsessed with communism? Because in our collective consciousness, we will always be the good guys. We will always be the thwarters of would-be infringements on our freedoms. And no, not your sissy left-wing freedoms, like choosing what happens to your body or reading books. Not those freedoms. We mean our American freedoms.
Like guns,
to be free to
the
amass
Bible.
wealth without government interference. To be free to be Christian. To be free to be a proud, white, heterosexual. The United States' obsession with communism was created in the 50s when we inextricably linked our national and moral identities as antithetical to communism, as two black and white opposing forces where we are clearly the good guys, endowed with a divine purpose to root out the bad guys at all costs. And that identity has morphed into the radical right that we see today, where any whiff of socialist democracy is used to fearmonger the masses, and where communism and terrorism have become inextricably linked in simple-minded conservatives who believe that being a patriot and a true American is the same thing as having a personality, and who see themselves as some strange mixture of G.I. Joe and Jesus, persecuted and righteous, while simultaneously on a mission to single-handedly destroy the dark forces they have been spoon-fed to believe are all around them. Because it turns out that, in the end, being anti-communist is as American as apple pie. If you liked this video, don't forget to check out my video from last week all about how Reagan—
gang, and being American is sitting on some bullshit. Yeah, we're gonna have to check out that how Reagan ruined everything. YouTube keeps putting it in my face in the algorithmic suggestions of what I need to watch next. Now, gang, the medium guy has only given you 3 problems. Therefore, the medium guy is only gonna give you 3 solutions. The first, Elon Musk and Bill Maher eat all of the things that will make your tummies hurt in the morning because you're both terrible human beings and I hate you. We need to eat the rich. And I hope they pay all the taxes. You know what they needed? Elon Musk probably himself could have got us out of this fucking debt limit crisis if we just didn't let his narrow ass buy Twitter and we took all his money from him. Like, we should have just taken his money and used it for public good. He pissed it all away anyway. UPS workers, we stand with you. You guys are good to go. UPS, though, you guys suck. You need to go fuck yourselves. You guys need to, and gang, I actually feel like, here's what's gonna happen. Here's what I think is gonna happen. Nothing good is gonna happen. Because right now, the top dogs in the land are the fucked up ass conservative Supreme Court. You know, whatever happens, people are just gonna appeal it and ensure that it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is going to ensure that things go the way of corporate control, and then we're all fucked because we're all going to be turned into gig workers if we aren't gig workers already. So UPS, you can go fuck yourself. And finally, fucking fake-ass American patriots who don't know what communism is, yet keep getting us into wars all over the world so you can be imperialist on behalf of Christianity and capitalism. Please go fuck yourselves, because this is sitting on some bullshit. All right, gang, I want to eat food and have fun and do fun things and gather. We're gonna have a dance party, I think, around 10 with Nitty. Yep, that's gonna be going on. You can see we're hanging out in the thing, the nightclub, the underground club. Boom, we're here, we're ready. It's me and Steph and Lena and UC Love, and that's where you're supposed to be. That's why you click the link down in the description where it says link up with the gang, and you come together and you have fun and you join the dance party at 10 tonight, and then we have fun, and then we do some other fun stuff. So we're gonna go do fun stuff. I'm gonna go eat some food. Here's what's gonna happen. Nothing good is gonna happen. Exactly. Nothing good is gonna happen. It's unfortunate, but this is America, and we are predictably terrible. Love you guys though. Glad we got to have some fun, and are just there watching sports. I don't know. There's no basketball on tonight. And so tomorrow there will be basketball. We've been watching television shows. Been watching Secession. I can't say the word. Secession. I said it correctly. But yeah, tomorrow we'll watch the basketball game. And I don't know. We'll probably play some video games. I don't know what we're doing. I'm hungry. I can't think about what I'm doing until after I eat. Because here's what happens. I say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Then I eat, then I get full. Then I just want to sit in the chair like this and smoke and just relax. And I go, oh, this chair feels comfortable. I don't want to do anything. So you know, the plan can change. Food changes the plan. That's why I don't eat before these shows, gang. You know how hard it would be to get through one of these shows after I eat? Man, after I eat, I turn into a vegetable. I don't eat a lot of vegetables, but I turn into one after I eat. All right, gang. Love you guys. Appreciate it. Kata, we'll see you hopefully when your internet stops hating you. Maya, if you don't like what's going on in Gather, you're supposed to stream something else. So quit complaining about sports and come hang out and have fun. All right, gang. We'll see you next time. And for your daily moment of Zen, we're going to leave you with this fucking weirdo.
You kind of caught me off guard here. Okay. Now, thank you, Lord. Help me. Let me put it very simple. It takes a lot of money to do what we do. Oh, yeah. Well, for example, that's really none of your business. But, hey, you listening to me? Let me give you another example. And I prayed about it, and I thought, back when, and I might add another thing, too. It's a misunderstanding. I'm talking about the Bible. God, I get excited talking about it because I love it. I had to learn this, the demons. Abraham was very, very well. I learned it from him, from the Bible.
There's a foundation in the Bible.
Wait a minute now. The blessing of Abraham. Abraham was extremely wealthy, and he had covenant with God. I'm talking about the Bible. Oh, God, I love this. And I started out standing. My grandfathers. I love the people. Those are the demons. And I understand that. And I love them with all my heart. If you go into the old covenant, and it's full of meanness, it's just full of hell on earth. He made that airplane so cheap for me, I couldn't help but buy it. I love your eyes. Face to face, personally. Just the same as Jesus is very real devil. Rulers of the darkness of this world. God bless, Father bless. But it's a biblical thing, it's a spiritual thing. It doesn't have anything to do with people. And it's full of miracles, and signs, and wonders. It's full of unseen things. Jesus, people, I love people. Dragging some woman down an aisle, it made me so mad I wanted to punch the guy out myself. We wrestle not with people. And I have a lot of natural gas.